your bell jar.
It's in his best interest. Oh, boy, he's 80. He's had cancer and everything else.
All right, good evening and welcome to the Thursday, June 27th, 2024 Scarborough Board of Education Workshop. Can we call the attendance, please?
Sure. Mr. Kelleher,
He will be here joining us late.
okay. Miss Leong,
Here.
Miss Lindstrom,
Here.
Miss Peterson,
Here.
Miss Turpinian,
Here.
Miss Trapani Huff.
Here.
All right, can everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Agenda item 4.0 is new business with the town council. 4.1 is the Scarborough survey results presented by Jason Morato, the vice president and director of community research of ETC Institute. He's joining us remotely to give us some insight and some feedback on the community survey. So Jason, are you,
Was he there?
we lose him? I never saw. Oh, I thought I saw his name earlier. Okay. Well, our next person is waiting. Isn't here yet either. Would you? Perfect. I'm sort of at a loss. I don't want to start talking about the, I guess I can just give some of the basics about the survey. I don't want to take too much of his, slides away, but maybe I can talk about the first two. The survey we sent out, it was a selected sample of households throughout Scarborough. The goal was to have 600 complete. That would have made the survey statistically valid. We actually got back a pretty decent amount of 902 were completed. So yeah, that was a pretty decent amount of surveys completed. So when you're looking at the respondents, the way they were selected is they were reflect the actual population of Scarborough. So that was the purpose of who got them. But there was also an opportunity for community members that did not get the statistically valid sample to complete the survey. So they were given the opportunity to reply on or to answer online. So 902 represents the statistically valid sample. There are others that took the survey as well. I don't feel qualified to go into the results. I'm hoping I don't want to speculate more so than I'm gonna see yeah, let's take a 5-minute recess just for us to kind of gather what's happening and then come back with Jason. Sound good?
Good.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta behave.
Yeah, but it's not only 20.
All right, thank you. Welcome back. We are resolved now. So we have Jason online with us. Welcome, Jason. I'm going to quickly turn it over to you. I went through the number of results you got and then I stopped there.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry about that. I don't know if I was on the wrong link or what, but now we're all set. So I don't know if I'm able to share my screen or if someone on your end needs to walk through it, but it said host disabled participant screen sharing when I tried to share.
Because it's a webinar.
Yeah, it's a webinar based, so you can just ask to advance and we can advance for you.
Okay. Okay, so do you have the slides up on your end or?
Can you not see that?
Yeah, you can't see them?
No, I cannot see them.
This could be interesting.
Okay.
I can just see, yeah, I can't see the slides.
Screen.
How about now?
Oh, there we go. Yep, now I can see them. Okay, great. Thanks. So my name is Jason Murado with ETC Institute. Need to be here tonight. We're a marketing research firm that specializes in conducting community surveys for local governments. And we just finished conducting the school building survey. You probably know we conducted the townwide resident satisfaction survey in 2023 and 2021. So this is the third survey we conducted for Scarborough, but the first one that's like this. Next slide. So just a little background about ETC Institute. We're based in the Kansas City area, but we're a national leader in providing market research for local governments. We've been doing this type of work for over 40 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we conducted surveys in more than 1,000 communities across the country. So this is really the type of work that we specialize in. Next slide. So just a little background about the survey. This survey was 3 pages in length, so it's a little shorter than the townwide resident satisfaction surveys that we've conducted in the past. The survey was administered by a combination of mail and online to randomly selected households throughout Scarborough. We had a very good response to the survey. Our goal was to receive at least 600 completed surveys, but we ended up with 902. So we were 50% above our goal. The results of the 902 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error plus or minus 3.2%. So essentially this means that if we conducted the survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 3.2% from what we're reporting. So even for a statistically valid survey like this, the results were never perfect, but the margin of error is very small. And as you were administering the survey, we made sure that the demographics of survey respondents reflect the actual population of Scarborough. Next slide. So first we'll start, there were several questions related to the level of importance of finding a solution to school facilities. Next slide. So this was the very first question on the survey. We gave respondents a statement and it asked how much they agree with the statement. It is urgent and should be the top priority of our town and schools to find a solution to the facility inadequacies at our kindergarten through second grade schools. So you can see on this chart, 62% of respondents feel that finding a solution to the kindergarten and second grade school facilities should be a top priority for the community. If you look at the 2 blue pieces of the pie, if you look at the red, only 21% don't feel it should be a top priority. Next slide. So what I did here is broke these results out by 4 different types of households. And I did this for a number of questions, and as you'll see throughout the presentation. So what this shows is the percent of respondents who feel that finding a solution to kindergarten through second grade schools should be a top priority for the community. So that top bar shows the results for households with children age 5 and under. So almost all households with young children feel like this should be a top priority for the town. The second row shows the results for households with children ages 6 to 19. Also strong support there. Then the third row shows the results for households where the members are between the ages of 20 and 64, but there's no children in these households. Then that bottom row shows the results for senior households, where the household members are 65 and old. So even for the households without children, over 50% still feel like this should be a top priority for the community. Next slide. So here we ask respondents if they feel it should be urgent and should be a top priority of the town and the schools to find a solution for 6th through 8th grade school facility inadequacies. The low level of support here is a little bit lower than it was for the kindergarten through 2nd grade schools, but not much. There's still strong support. 59% of respondents feel that finding a solution should be a top priority. And that's 59% of overall results. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the results broken out for those 4 categories again. So just like the previous question, the highest level of support is with the households with young children, also strong support for households with children ages 6 to 19. And then around 50% of households without children still think this should be a top priority for the community. Next slide. Then we asked respondents if they feel it's important to remove all portable classrooms in the district and have permanent school structures in place. So 55% of respondents say they do agree that that's important, compared to only 25% who don't. And then 19% are neutral, kind of somewhere in the middle. And then the next slide, again, I broke the results out by those different age groups. So the most support by far is with those households with young children, also strong support for households with the older children. The least support is with households ages 20 to 64 that don't have kids in the household. A little more support for the senior households. Next slide. So then the survey got into some possible solutions. Next slide. So here we asked respondents to rate their level of support for different statements regarding solutions to primary school. So if you look at this top row, 53% of respondents are supportive of keeping neighborhood schools, even if it costs more and has a longer construction timeline. If you look at that second row, 49% are supportive of keeping neighborhood schools, but only if it costs less than a consolidated school. And then if you look towards the bottom of this chart, there's less support for one consolidated school. In some cases, we ask only if it costs less. If you look at the bottom row, there's only 15% who are supportive of one consolidated primary school, regardless of the costs. Next slide. So for the question that asked about the keeping neighborhood schools, even if it costs more and has longer construction timelines, this is the percent of each type of household who is supportive of that. And here the results are pretty similar among all the different types of households. The senior households are actually slightly more supportive than the other types of households. Next slide. And this chart shows the level of support among the different types of households for keeping neighborhood schools, but only if it costs less than a consolidated school. So you can see the most support is with the households with young children, but there's not a huge difference among the different types of households. Next slide. Now we also asked about, those previous questions were about primary schools. Now we're asking about middle school. If you look at this top row, 54% of respondents are supportive of limited renovations that removes all portable classrooms, but only allows for 7th and 8th grades. So 6th grade moves to Wentworth, grade 3 moves to kindergarten through 2nd grade schools. And then if you look at the second row down, 49% are supportive of a renovation in addition that removes all portable classrooms and maintains the 6th to 8th grade span, even if that means that it costs more to do so. Next slide. So these are the results broken out for those who support a limited renovation that removes all portable classrooms, but only allows for 7th to 8th grades. You can see the most support by far is with households with young children, then the households with older children. Next slide. And then here, these are the results broken out for those for renovation or addition that removes all portable classrooms and maintains that 6th to 8th grade span, even if that means that it costs more. And here you can see the results are pretty similar among all groups. The households with children ages 6 to 19 are the most supportive. Next slide. And then here we gave respondents a statement. They asked how much they agree with this. The statement is, I will most likely support the solution recommended by the new school building advisory committee, regardless of cost or grade span changes. So overall, 30% of respondents say they would support the recommendation, regardless of cost or grade span. Most residents, though, want some more information. 53% don't agree that they would support what's recommended, no matter what. And another 17% are kind of neutral, kind of in the middle. Now, if you go to the next slide, I also broke this one out by different types of households. So for households with young children, 56% of those households said they would be likely to support whatever is recommended, regardless of cost or grade span. Just under 40% of those households with older children would support the recommendation no matter what. Low levels of support, though, for the households without children, unless they have some more information. Next slide. So then we move on to just some other findings from the survey. So here we asked respondents about grade groupings. If you look at the light blue section, and that statement at the bottom is a typo. What it actually should say is that 2/3 of respondents feel that grade groupings could be slightly altered if necessary to allow for more flexible spacing needs within the school system. So most respondents are open to at least slightly altering the grade groupings if needed. If you look at that green section at 18%, that's the percent who feel like grade groupings are appropriate as they are and should not be changed. 8% say regrouping of grades should be the last option considered, but they're open to it if absolutely necessary. And then the other 7% don't have an opinion. Next slide. And then we asked about the use of eminent domain. Kind of mixed responses here. If you look at the dark blue, 8% say they have no issues with eminent domain because the school solution is the most important issue facing the community. 20% would be open to supporting eminent domain, but only if it has a minimal impact to the property owners. Just over a third, 37%, say would only support eminent domain if there are no other reasonable alternatives. And then the other 34% don't support it under any circumstances. Next slide. And then we asked respondents if land had to be purchased for construction purposes, how important is it to you that it's located near the municipal campus? Well, just over 50% of respondents don't feel that that's important. 26% say somewhat important. 11% do feel it's very important. But then the other 12% are not sure. And if you go to the next slide, I also broke this out by the different types of households. Now, for households with young children, 50% do think it's important. That's located near the municipal campus. Just under 50% of households with the older children feel it's important. For households without children, a far lower percentage don't feel that this is important. Next slide. And then we asked how much of an increase to your taxes do you think is reasonable support for a school solution? So we have a wide range of options. The one thing that stood out to me here is that if you look at the dark red section, only 20% of respondents say they would not support any solution to increase taxes. So 80% support some level of increase. And you can see that level varies quite a bit. You have the pink section, which is 26%, say less than $200 a year. We actually had 10%, the dark blue, who said any amount necessary, and then everything else is somewhere in between. Next slide. And then for those who voted against the school building project last time, we asked what were your reasons for not supporting. That made up a little over 30% of the survey responses. The top reason was the cost was too high. 80% said the cost was too high. Between 59 and 63% said they didn't like the land deal. They prefer smaller neighborhood schools, and they believe more options should be explored. Next slide. And then we asked respondents how they would like to stay informed about the building committee's work moving forward. And you can see that the most preferred methods of staying informed are a dedicated webpage on the town's website, and then ongoing information in the Scarborough Leader provided on a predictable schedule. Next slide. So that's everything that I had to go through. Just kind of a quick recap. We saw that respondents feel that finding a solution for school facilities is a high priority for the community. Obviously, that was especially important for households with children, but even for households without children, the majority feel like this is a high priority for the community. The majority of respondents feel it's important to remove portable classrooms and have permanent school structures. The majority of respondents prefer to keep neighborhood schools as opposed to consolidating to one primary school. And the majority of respondents support some level of tax increase to support a solution for school facilities. Obviously, the amount that's supported varies, as we saw on that pie chart a couple slides ago, but there is overall a high level of support. Next slide. So that's everything that I had. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions from counselors, from board members?
I had a question, yeah.
Sure.
In regards to the question that about how much of an increase to your taxes do you think is reasonable to support a school solution? Are we only talking about construction cost?
Number 28, slide 28.
I don't, it says it's question 10. I think
Yeah.
The question.
This is it right
that's the
here,
same question
yeah.
I have for everything tonight is, are we only talking about construction? Okay.
For this one, this was all in solution. We didn't specify if it was construction, like in the narrative to the question, we didn't specify this is for construction only, just how much would you support? So when you look at, if we talk about the referendum in November, when you look at the price tag, that included construction, soft costs, land purchasing, road work. What am I missing? Renovations to the existing schools, renovations to the, I'm sorry, to the middle school. So it was an all-in package.
I'm wondering that, are you referring to like the operating costs of what it would
Saving
take?
that for later.
Okay,
Survey right now.
well, that's what that's what I thought you were asking, like, there's the,
I'm trying to
School
stick to the
costs.
survey right now. So. Yeah.
It's sort of a related question to the taxes. In this presentation, they said people were willing to pay up to a certain amount a year. The way it was worded, I think, in the referendum, or the way it's been calculated, is that is the impact for $400,000 valuation. So if you have an $800,000 home, does that mean people are willing to spend $1,000? Or does that dollar amount referenced in the survey is the overriding cut point, if you will?
that's a good question.
Yeah, because this was done before the reevaluation went out, right? So
Yes.
values have shifted. Mhm.
But the way he stated it, he said it was $500 a year, which leads one to believe that's the total impact across all taxpayers, not $500 per 400,000 evaluation. So if you have an $800,000
Yes.
home, that's $1,000.
Yes, because
That would-
that was not in the narrative, to your point. It
Right.
didn't say in the narrative, if your home is valued at 400,000, would you support?
Yeah.
What would you support?
But it's critical to this process because if it's the latter, if they're only going to support 500, we've calculated that they would support up whatever, that 500 per 400,000. So it changes the price point of the project that would be approved.
I would disagree. Just knowing how people take surveys. Not that I'm an expert in it, but knowing people, I mean, it's black and white for them. It's how much more would you be willing to pay in your tax bill every year
Yeah.
for the school? So I don't think they're thinking about the value of their house or anything. They're
Right.
just saying, how much more would you be willing to add to your tax bill? That's how I look at it. I was actually one of those who took the survey. That's how I looked at it, so.
But Tom, just a quick question. When you did your approximation of what is the project that would be supported by that range, was it based on valuation per 400,000, or was it based on, did you put out a number of 70 to 130 million?
Yeah, it didn't consider valuation. It was using the parameters, the range of 200 to 400
Yeah, total tax.
total
Total
tax,
tax.
regardless of value.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can you go to slide 15?
Yes.
I have a question, Jason, about question 4. So if you look at this, if you look at the first option, the keeping the neighborhood schools, even if it costs more, that is, and you add together this very supportive or somewhat supportive, that is roughly 53%. If you go down to the third option, a solution with the lowest cost possible, that is roughly 45%. So when you talk statistics and you're talking about differences, how large of a difference is 53% versus 45%? Is that pretty significant? Is that not significant? Is it pretty close?
It's fairly significant for this survey. So the margin of error for the entire 900 surveys was plus or minus 3.2%. So any difference beyond that we consider to be at least a somewhat significant difference. So I would say 8% is a pretty significant difference because of the number of completed surveys that we had. And also look at the 6% difference between the 33% who were very supportive and the 27% who were very supportive. So there is a fairly significant difference between those two.
I have a question. I'm trying to think of how to frame it. So one of the things, like, while I appreciate the survey and the fact that it was scientific, you know, ultimately it's people who vote at the polls, which isn't necessarily scientific, that decides the outcome ultimately. And so I'm just curious, maybe the survey aside, like people who opt in to take surveys, are they also more likely to vote? I don't know if there's research that says, so that we can say this is like a reflection of people who would be likely to vote, or is that just a variable that we'll just have to work through? You guys kind of following me what I'm?
Wasn't that a question on
Yeah,
the survey? Did you vote in the
95% of
last election?
Respondents voted.
Oh, they did? Oh, So
They did.
at least we know the people who
Mhm.
participated, 95%, but that's good.
Right, that's how they responded.
I don't remember what voter participation was in that election necessarily, but
It was high, I think.
am I right about that, Jason? 95% of respondents said they voted?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was one of the questions on the survey. Yeah, 95% of the people who took the survey said they did vote in the November 2023 election.
I have one more question. If we go to slide, when we were with Karen asked about 28, slide 28, sorry. If you go back. Can you draw any correlation between, what was interesting to me is 26% voted that they would support a $200 to $400 increase. So just that specific piece of the pie is interesting to me because that is what we said our last impact, the referendum that failed, that was the impact. But here we're seeing, there's some, again, doesn't seem it's significant support, but when you look around the pie, we're roughly in the same area, but based on what you just said, it seems it's a pretty significant difference. But can you draw any correlation between that? Is there a reason why people would support something when ostensibly some of them would have voted no in November at the referendum?
Sorry, so you're wondering, is this number a little more positive than what you're expecting based on how people voted last time? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there could be a number of factors. Maybe, I don't know how it was worded, last time. Maybe the survey provided more information that people hadn't thought about before. There could be a number of different factors. Um, some time has passed. Maybe some people have changed their opinions for whatever reason. I think there's a lot of things that could impact that. One thing we could do is run a crosstab because we asked how people voted on the plan last time. We could run a crosstab to see for those who voted yes last time, how did they answer this question versus those who voted no last time? How did they, answer this question 10?
Yeah.
There's also another slide that perhaps speaks to that,
The other reasons.
the reasons why.
Yeah.
Cost is too
Yeah.
high was certainly 80%, but didn't like the land deal 63%.
Correct.
Prefer smaller schools 62%. So there are other reasons people may have voted no, other than cost.
So that was gonna be my follow-up question, because when you look at this one, which is the one you're referencing, the cost too high being 80%, but then having that in my mind, what felt a pretty significant amount that said $200 to $400 was good, felt good. Does that mean that we're talking about the cost is too high price tag wise? Does that mean we're talking what Karen was saying? Is it the overall cost that felt too high? That I seem to think like maybe we suffered a little bit from sticker shock, I guess is what I'm wondering. Is that a possibility? Like I couldn't get to what this means to
Well-
me personally because the sticker price was too high.
One thing that may have happened, time has passed, things may have moderated, other school projects have come forward that are in a similar similar cost point. We were kind of leading the pack. We were one of the early ones out there with a big number.
Yeah.
Jason, do you recall with this question that's up now, were folks able to, was it exclusive to say single answer as to the reason, or could they,
As much as they wanted.
as much as they wanted? So they could have selected multiple reasons for voting no.
I
Right.
think
Yeah, you could pick multiple reasons. And just looking at the numbers, it looks like a lot of people did pick multiple reasons. So yeah, you could pick as many of these as you wanted.
Well, and I think to go back to what you said, Shannon, like when we were looking at that other slide and 26% were in that sweet spot of 200 to 400. And then if you compare that to this 80% said it was too high, so 20% said it was just right. If you look at the margin of error, 26% here, 20% there, you're pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, like the fact that they answered the question first around cost, what they would like, and then we asked this afterwards, I think we've already kind of primed them a little bit. So I think it's probably people thought they were paying more than 200 to 400. I think it goes more back to what Peter was saying of like, we communicated an impact based on value. But if people did the calculation and said, but my value is greater than that, so I'm gonna pay more than 400. Again, I think that's the hard part of like, not everybody's gonna pay the same amount. It's really
Right.
gonna be variable.
Right.
But everybody, at least according to this, would like to see it around 400.
I actually had a slightly different takeaway, which was, my biggest takeaway from this overall was that we have an extremely divided population. So we're talking 50% on every plan.
Yeah.
So my question really is, this reinforced that many people voted for multiple reasons. There are some overlap, but I don't think we should read too much into this overlap as in this 26 is equal to that 20%. I don't think that's true at all. I think people voted for very specific reasons and they have very specific drivers. And we're seeing that in the presentation we're about to have, but we're seeing that in the survey. And so my real question is, how do you get consensus when you have people who are divided in roughly quarters? So how do you get those quarters to unite? Because we can all fight over the quarter we think is best, and we're never going to get over that line, 50%, unless and until we figure out that answer.
I had the same exact
I had the same
reaction when I looked at this. I was like, we got our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
We
Yeah.
need some community agreement on, I know that's seems the antithesis of reality, to be honest, but we need some overarching agreement from people who don't agree about a process that's fair, that they can get on board with so that we can find a way to compromise. That's the reality. Building consensus is about bringing groups together with different feelings. And some of these are black and white. You either have multiple schools or you have one. There's no in between or compromise there. So there's got to be a path forward. But how do we bridge that gap with everybody? Because I think the one takeaway I do have is everyone agrees there's a problem. That's the only thing that the survey told us everyone agrees on. There's a big problem. So that's good. At least we all are dealing with the same reality. That's a positive. But that's the next step, which is how do you get people who all think they know the right answer because everybody is right, and I accept that everyone's right, to agree on something that we can all get behind when we have really 4 very different narratives about how this solution is gonna work. If that's my takeaway, not to steal your thunder.
Well, it sounds,
I don't have. any-
feels like that's a good segue.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Jason? Or if not, I'll turn it to Peter. So thank you so much, Jason.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
have a question.
Okay, can you hang on to it for me? Because I can get, is it for Jason?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, quickly.
On the survey, the 902 returns.
Jim, please take the podium up.
Yeah.
Jason can't hear you.
On the survey, the 902 respondents, was that out of the mailing?
Yes.
If
Yeah,
it is,
yes.
did we receive any information from the taxpayers that didn't receive the survey?
The online.
The online.
Right. Yeah, these 902 responses are from households we selected at random to participate in the survey. Now, that was a combination of mail and online. We mailed the survey, but then the mailed survey also had a link to an online survey and then a QR code on the envelope. So for people who got the survey in the mail, there are multiple ways they could take the survey. And that's what these 902 responses are based on. Now, we did have a small number of people outside of the random sample who took the survey, who came across the link through whatever way. It's a small number and we didn't factor that into this, but those would be separated from this. In order for the results to be considered statistically valid, there's really 2 things that have to happen. One is that households are selected at random to participate in the survey. And then the second thing is that the demographics of survey respondents need to reflect the actual population of the town.
Were the results of those that did the online compatible with what the 902 responses were?
I have to go back and double check. We didn't receive many completed surveys from the from the general public I'll call it, those outside the random sample. So I'll have to double check on those results, but we didn't spend much time at all analyzing it because it was a small number. I believe it was 30 surveys or maybe even less than that.
That's not, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I, if there's other questions, Jason, just because I do want to get to the building committee recommendation and I know someone else is waiting, can I send you the questions? Would you be okay to answer them offline?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, feel free to send me whatever questions and I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Really quick, last one.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yes, you're welcome.
Hi, quick question. I don't know whether or not I imagine that you are a survey analyst as well as a survey maker and taker, that sort of thing. So my question is, can you, given all of the various options that were referenced in the survey, provide, whether we agree with it or not, what this survey means in terms of which kind of school building the community would most support and rank them?
Well, there are a couple slides that got into that a little bit, questions 4 and 5 on the survey. It was kind of mixed results. I mean, it wasn't a real clear, definitive number 1. I think some of the comments people were making were right on target, that the survey clearly shows that residents think this is important, something needs to be done, but there are kind of mixed results as to what people think is the best solution.
That's what we found out.
We lived it for 8 months.
All right, thank you, Jason. And then if the building committee sends any more questions to me, because they're here and I know you can't see them, but they're here in attendance, I'll send them over to you for answering. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Yep, sounds great. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right, agenda item 4.2 is the school building advisory committee presentation. So Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, did you load?
Yes.
I sent you that.
Yeah.
Perfect. And before I start, for folks that don't know, there was a committee that was formed, the Scarborough Building Advisory Committee. I see many of the members here tonight. Further in my deck, I have a list of the names, but if those people that are here don't mind standing up and just being recognized, they have done an amazing job. They've met every Monday night. These are some very passionate, very.
pizza?
More pizza, that's Tom's department. But I was amazed. These people have pledged every Monday night. They met for 2 or 3 hours and they really were trying to come up, some of the things we discussed, really trying to find the right solution. So I think this is a public meeting. My outline for this, the next slide, is to talk a little bit about what is the school building committee. It's called SABET. How have you been pronouncing it?
SBAC.
SBAC. And I'll talk a little bit about what we were supposed to do. I'll talk a little bit about process and some of the key findings. And you've already heard about the survey, but this group that was working on the solutions really took it to heart to use that survey information to try to decipher the very questions you're asking is what does this community want? And what will this community support? And then at the very end, we have some recommendations for your consideration. So a little bit about the background, if you're there.
One more.
Next slide and I'll do it.
Yeah, next slide.
Okay, so a little bit. So again, this group was formed when the referendum failed last fall. This group was formulated, the town council school board got together and decided that they really needed to bring the public into the conversation so they could better understand what the community needs and would support. They're all volunteers, as I said. It started with a group of about 70, but there have been 50 that have religiously come every week, and they have done incredible work. Some have traveled to Massachusetts to look at different options. They've invested heart and soul, and they really didn't come with a preconceived agenda, at least from my perspective. They really are trying to find what they thought was right for Scarborough. And the 2 of the town council members and 2 of the board's education members attended every meeting and kind of coached us and guided us and gave us sage advice along the way. And then I will talk a little bit about our charter, which is the next slide. So we really were an ad hoc committee, as I suggested. It was sponsored by the Board of Education and Town Council. And we were to kind of help develop a solution of current and future space deficiencies, or define what the problem was within the K through 8 schools. The leadership team, some of us are here, thank you. We acted as really just kind of a guide in giving them the tools the groups needed to work. But from that, we didn't really weigh in on trying to direct them in any direction. And I compliment the elected officials there. They kind of let the groups storm and perform, I guess is the saying. So with that, our charge, the charter that we were responding to that was given to us is we're to organize the appropriate subcommittees as necessary to evaluate the following. We evaluated the school enrollment projections that were used to come up with the original proposal. We looked at the space needs analysis. We looked at the business case, and we looked at some other issues. And so our original charge was to look at the information that drove the original referendum decision and try to verify and confirm those numbers. And then the other part of our charter was we are to provide a final recommendation. As you said, this was a May 1st deadline in here. We didn't make that deadline. But we're here tonight to kind of explain where we are and sort of our outcomes. The next slide really talks about the members that participated religiously for the last 4 months. Incredible amounts of time and energy. So thank you everyone that did that. And we really had our process, our steps really were, it's going to be confusing because there was 4 steps or 4 phases to these first steps. And it really was, step 1 was baselining, which was what I just described. We took all the materials that were provided in the original development of the proposal and try to go through those numbers and verify that the information was accurate and try to verify it. The second step was, once we did some baselining, we had some people come in and talk to us about what the school needs were and what the enrollment projections were and other things. Once we did that, we moved kind of into the analysis phase. And what we did is we self-divided into 4 groups. Whatever people are interested in working on, there was a group for enrollment to confirm the enrollment numbers. There was a group that worked on finance. Thank you, Nessa, for doing that. There was a benchmarking group. And the finance group was really looking to verify the financial assumptions that were put forth in the referendum. The benchmarking group was really to go out and try to identify best practices in the educational community, especially in our surrounding communities and others. So they were really trying to find what are other communities doing that we're not doing that we should consider. And then there was an infrastructure committee that got together and they actually visited all the schools and really looked at what are their needs within the schools. They talked to some of the principals. They looked at some of the spaces. They really were trying to develop what is needed to move forward. In addition to that, and I see some folks here, Dawn is one from the Elizabeth from the communications committee. So thank you. There was a communications committee formed because there was a real need, just as the questions were asked here. How are we going to communicate this? What do we need to communicate to get the support that we need to get to a yes? Because I think you're right. This whole group understands there is an issue and we do need to have a solution. So how do we get to yes? And what does that look like? And the communications committee has done an awesome job of starting to do that. So once we did sort of the benchmarking and sort of that analysis, then step 3 was kind of options workshop. And what was really interesting is of all 50 members, when they looked at all the information that was provided, we had one night where after all that analysis and they had some of their questions answered, we opened up the mic sort of like a karaoke night or something, saying anybody that wants to popcorn a solution they think should be considered based on all that you've learned. They did. And there were a lot of people that came up to the podium, they presented, and we had, Alyssa, thank you for describing the concepts. We had, I don't know how many poster boards. Tom, you were there. We had probably a dozen different,
I would say so.
different options. And so people put out very detailed suggestions. And then the whole group, all 50, were given dots. And they went around and put their stickers on the solutions that they were most interested in pursuing in deeper detail and the ones they thought were the most viable. And there were a lot of very, very similar ideas. So we collapsed a lot of the ideas into a large group. And then they worked on that. They went off and did some legwork. I know for some of the solutions, Jim, I'll look to you, and Jack, your ideas about the permanent modulars, I guess. You guys spent a lot of time talking to the manufacturer and others. So they put a ton of time into it. And then the last step of the process is where we are now, is sort of drafting our final recommendation of where we are. So the key findings really were around enrollment. We looked at the enrollment. The enrollment is increasing. We did update the enrollment projections. We think the original one that it was based on was low. We actually upped the projections of what enrollment was going to be, certainly in phase. And we did not have any resources for any outside expertise to do either the finance or the construction or the enrollment. But certainly in phase 2, that needs to be checked. And one thing that wasn't factored in is there are new growth ordinances that may slow growth or may not slow growth. But that wasn't taken into account in the projection. So that should be factored in to see what our needs are going to be. There was a benchmarking and programming group that took a look at 10 neighboring school districts, as I said. They came away with, there's some similarities, but we also have some deficiencies. So they kind of reported out, what they think we needed to address in some of the solution. And one of the big ones you'll see on that last bullet on this slide is a lot of communities do not have shared cafeteria and gym spaces, and we do. And that was something that some of these solutions address. And then getting to the key findings on infrastructure. The infrastructure committee had identified there are some deficiencies, especially around security of the different facilities we have that should be addressed. There are other issues, but a lot of it was deficiencies around security and not appropriate space for music and art and some of the other things. So that's in some of the solutions. The finance committee was charged with trying to verify the numbers that Harriman came up with that was used in not only the business case, but also in the construction cost. And I was on the finance committee along with Vanessa and some others that are here. And we were unable to verify the numbers. We weren't able to get the information we needed to verify the numbers. We do think there's some opportunity in those numbers, especially around the business case. We just didn't understand some of the numbers. So when we look in phase 2 for outside consultants, that really is a place that needs to be looked at. The townwide survey, you've heard some of the things we just heard, but certainly the group really gives a priority to the facility inadequacies. They did take to heart the survey about portables and what that means, although we'll talk about a creative solution that one of the groups came up with. Again, the issue comes in this group, this committee, when they were meeting, really felt pretty passionately in looking at the survey that neighborhood schools are important to preserve if we can, and it's reasonable. So that was one of that came out of the townwide survey. They also, at least this group, when we met, was real concerned about whatever word we want to use. There was a lot of debate. Is it a consolidated school? Is it a unified school? Is it a community school? They really took to heart that they felt the majority of the community did not want to support that. So again, that next step will be really important to nail down some of the numbers and operating costs and other things. And again, we've talked about the tax increases, but that was something this group actually thought about. They know there's a problem. They think we have the next pass at the poll. We really should get something that passes, because if it doesn't pass, it'll be another 18 months or so. We worked with Tom to use the numbers that were in the survey to try to come up with an estimated project cost. And Tom, do you mind sharing that? You came?
Yeah, our debt modeling suggests that taxes increase between $200 and $400 a year really puts us in a range for construction cost of 70 million to 130 million. So it's a fairly broad range. I would just add, interestingly enough, independent of that, before we even did that estimate, most of the projects, all of them fit, I think, within that range somewhat comfortably, at least 3 of them.
The solution set.
Solutions.
Yeah.
So I think that gave everyone some comfort that we're kind of in the right area.
In the sweet spot.
Whether from a cost perspective, whether it met all the needs is another consideration, but that's the range, 70 to 130 million.
But certainly speaking for the committee, that was a consideration. What's going to pass at the polls based on the response to the survey?
Yeah, and I think with that, to your point, Peter, I think there seemed to be some comfort around 100 million to kind of pick the middle point of that, to your point of getting something that could get passed. That seemed to be where the committee was gravitating.
And the good news is the 4 solutions that we have kind of recommended all fit within that category, we think, but we're not construction experts. There's a lot of details still. But so that we try to use the survey to drive some of the results. So the recommendations of the committee, it really comes down to, and there was a lot of spirited conversation about, do we come up with one or do we come up with some? There's a high interest in preserving the primary and middle schools. There's a very specific proposal. There's a little more detail. We certainly had conversations around a community school, whatever the words are you want to use to describe it, because it's a politically sensitive issue. A community school, meaning we would, do away with the neighborhood schools and build one school. There was a proposal to move 2nd grade and 3rd grade from the primary schools onto a new building on the campus, municipal campus. We never did resolve whether there is land or that's an option, which will need to be further reviewed. And then there was a 4th primary school built a new fourth primary school being built that would be built and would be able to meet a lot of the criteria we talked about deficiencies. But it was also built in mind with space for pre-K. Pre-K was not within the scope of what we did. But some of the committee members felt pre-K is coming, and is this an opportunity to get ahead of that curve or not? So those are the four options. And again, to get to your point, the groups that worked on these were very passionate about their solutions. And we ended up recommending, we had actually worked with Nick and April and Shannon to come up with 4 things that need to be further, what we're recommending, these 4 solutions get moved forward to the next phase. Because the biggest issue is we didn't have the expertise to figure out, the big issue that's the unknown is what's the rehab cost. If we're gonna do things to the neighborhood schools, what is that gonna cost? New construction is pretty easy to determine. We had some really talented people. The original proposal was about $800 a square foot. New schools across the state are being built for around 600. So we do think there's some room. But we don't know. That has to be vetted by someone that knows the stuff. We don't. This is just sort of a back of the envelope. I will say in the details in the report, one of the groups, Jack and Jen, came up with a really creative idea. I guess there's a firm in Massachusetts that is making permanent modular. So as I understand it, they can do the construction of these units offsite in their manufacturing plant. And the big issue in trying to rehab the schools is the time frame. How long does it take to rehab the schools and get them back online? Under this model, they can manufacture these buildings during winter, and then they can bring them in during the summer and plop them down on the site, and they're ready to go in the fall. And the construction costs are lower than the 800 we were considering. And they have some pictures of it, and they look like permanent buildings. They do not look like the modulars that we have today. If you were to look at one of these buildings versus a stick-built building, you'd probably be hard pressed to see the difference. But that needs to be determined. There's a lot more detail in the executive report. These 4 things is what the committee recommended should go forward to phase 2 for consideration to get the right enrollment numbers, get the right construction numbers, so we understand whether it fits within the guidelines Tom came. And then the last page of this document for your consideration is we did come up with a sort of an evaluation sheet of the 4 proposals, and we identified the problems we're trying to solve for with the designs. And as you can see, some of these meet all of the design criteria, all the deficiencies, if you will, and some don't meet all of them. But that's here for your consideration. And I'd encourage you, if you have any questions about these options, the experts are in the room behind. They literally spent tons of time trying to figure this out. So if you have any questions, there's a bunch of us here. We'd be glad to answer any of them for you. Did I misspeak on anything, Jack or Jim?
Is there, are we keeping one of the email addresses active for questions from the public? If they had a question on this, do we encourage them to email SBAC or BCLT?
Yeah, there's a communications email that, can you remind me? I don't want to say it incorrectly, Elizabeth.
There's a contact form on the website.
Yes.
So people can
Go right there. Yeah.
And that's on the school website.
It's on the building page website, actually. So when they go to the building page website, there's, which has been really revamped nicely with this phase. So if they go there, there's a contact us button. And when you click that, that's what goes to the communications team. So they'll get a hold of it and then vet it out accordingly. So yes, anybody in the public can ask questions. Absolutely.
Did a recommendation come out? Did you guys agree on one of the choices out of the 4?
You'll see in the executive summary that there were some of these that had a much higher preference of the group, and some of them had a much lower preference. There was a marked difference.
But the recommendation is, I think to Karen's question, is to move forward all 4.
To move forward all 4, because we just have incomplete information. I
Right.
mean, we don't know what the cost of these things are. The big wild card is what's it gonna take to refurbish the neighborhood schools? Is it And the permanent modulars will be a case of just totally demolishing the schools and bringing in a replacement, because there'll be 2 stories instead of 1 story. But we don't have the numbers for that. So our thought is that the first phase of the next process should be crack down some of those numbers and make sure they're good.
Are there other municipalities like us that have primary schools that are spread out, so they have more than one primary school? We're not alone. And so in Scarborough, though, our primary schools do not all provide the same level of special ed service. Are we going to be, I know, because is that part of the consideration where with the recommendation for a 4th school, are we still going to be forcing children to go to outside the neighborhoods, or are we going to be bumping up this budget and actually providing special ed services at all the primary schools?
I mean, there was lots of conversations among the groups. Again, the devil will be in the details. That they were aware of how do we provide an equity.
We certainly did discuss that as a drawback.
What do other
of the-
municipalities do? Do they do what we do? For a municipality this size, I guess.
When we compare ourselves to other municipalities that have neighborhood schools, you know, speaking for another district that I previously worked in that had multiple elementary schools, it was a very similar model where not all special education services could be provided at all of the schools. The problem that you run into with a small school is you have a limited number of classrooms. And I think, as you know, I have talked about at a previous meeting before, what happens is the more specialized special education service that is needed, the smaller that grouping of students is. And so if you have 2 students who need a functional life skills program in the 8 Corners neighborhood and 2 students in the Pleasant Hill and 4 students in the Blue Point area, that becomes very cost prohibitive, right? Not only from a staffing standpoint, but also from a physical classroom standpoint. And so it is definitely a drawback to a neighborhood model.
Yeah, and I that was not touched upon. I didn't see that in the surveys. And then I think also the 6th grade, I mean, they don't even provide special ed within the building. And I think if people maybe knew that, they might have a different maybe response or opinion about how discriminatory that is.
I do think, and some of the participants are here, and certainly, you know, we didn't come up with the final configurations. The thought of using the permanent modulars would give a lot more classroom space in each location. So there was conversations about what is equitable. And could we offer more services? The devil will be in the detail as we weed through these options. But we thought what we heard from the survey, people were saying they wanted to at least see different options were considered. So they can make that informed decision, I think you're suggesting.
I think
And that was the
coming
point
from
of
this
this.
side, what I want to understand is, coming from budget season, is,
Mhm.
okay, here's a price tag to build, but come budget season, my fear is suddenly your budget's gonna explode and we're gonna have hard no. And
Right.
that's just like looking at all this, that's why the numbers scare me, because I'm like, what's included, what's not included? I'm great, it could cost $100 million to build a school, but now we have to staff a school and suddenly your budget is so increased and people are like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, my suggestion is that if you get some outside expertise.
Yeah.
That should be a component of what they look at is
Right.
the operating cost.
I,
We didn't do that because we.
Why not?
Yeah.
Well, do it all.
I think when the way I read the survey and the response I get is very similar to Freyla. I think you have a community that wants to keep the neighborhood schools and they want the cheapest solution. And those 2 things, as we know, just are not the same thing.
Right.
So then I get into, okay, well, what does that really look like? What is the reality of it? And what are, costs behind it and what does it mean long-term? So if we have 3 schools and or 4, let's just say we lump those 2 together and that's one option that we have. There are long-term implications that are not considered yet in phase 1. So what does it do to transportation department? What does it do to the district spell schedule? What does it do to families when we have to redistrict? What does it do to families when you have school kids at multiple schools? What does it do to staff when we need more than 1 special ed teacher? We need 4 now. And so all of these have budgetary implications beyond just this initial price tag, right? And those are a constant and a continual need. So what I think, like in my mind, what would work is if we can draw down to two solutions, one that is keeping the neighborhood schools, one that is cheaper, and then we do, and this is where I'm gonna look to Tom. I know we are not in a position, I know it's a recommendation in here, I know we're not going to be ready for a November non-binding referendum, because that would need to get to you by August, and we're in the end of June right now. So it's not gonna happen. And so what are our other options? If we can't do a non-binding referendum question in November, how else can we appropriately survey the community? Because essentially what we need to know, and I think this is kind of where you were going, you have two very distinct values. I value a small neighborhood school. I value affordability and being able to stay in my home. And at some point, we have to have the community align their values and say, this is what I will support. This is the value that rises to the top, and this is what I will support for a solution. And I need a little bit more in the way of how do we do that outside of we did the, in November, we did the exit polling, and it seemed to me, in hindsight, when we saw the numbers, it seemed to me the majority of people that stopped and did that were people who voted yes. And so that wasn't wildly helpful in the grand scheme of things when we had that failed, 3-1. So what is the other way that we can get a beat, or read on the temperature of the town without doing a non-binding referendum?
I don't want to take that, so go ahead.
I'm actually gonna add something more complicated to it.
Let me answer that first.
Well, more like, again, we've struggled multiple times, right? This isn't the first time we've gotten to a point where we have options and need to try and get those options to one option. That happened in 2017. It happened with the last solution, and we're kind of at the same spot with this. I don't know what the process is to build the consensus. So my question is, and I don't know if this has happened in the state or if it's even permissible, when we do go to referendum, can you do a ranked choice option?
John, that was mine. I was gonna say.
Stole it. Well, because again, it's clear to your point,
That's not a bad.
there are options, and no would certainly be one of those ranked choice options for anything. So it's not that you have to pick one and we're gonna build one. It's more, if there's one that clearly rises to the top that gets us to a point that most of the community can live with it, even if it's not the number one that's chosen by the most people, can we get to a point where we can actually get something that we can live with? Because I think all of these we could technically live with. We need more information, I think, for people to make an informed choice. But once maybe we get from 4 to 3 or 4 to 2, can we do a ranked choice vote?
Can I piggyback off that? Because I was absolutely thinking that, because
It's
Chief
more
Elizabeth,
complicated. But
Chief Elizabeth did something where they gave options. And one of the things that we heard very clearly in the community is they were very angry about not having options. And I don't think that was isolated. I think that was
Right.
for of a stronger feeling. Because we definitely heard about it in commentary, but I think many people would have liked some options.
Yep.
And so I think there's gotta be a way to build it, and ranked choice is one way that's worked for some things, if anybody can understand how it works. The other one is giving options that are not ranked choices, like vote this one, or this one. That's dangerous because
Right.
it splits votes even
Right.
more,
Right.
dilutes votes even more. So I think thinking that carefully, but I think we've got to find a way to build a choice in there. But I also want to take what Karen was saying, which is, there are some things that are not easy for people to access information because it doesn't have to do with their pocketbook. It doesn't have to do with how much their
Right.
tax bill is going to be. It doesn't have to do whether they like the idea of neighborhood schools or they like the idea of a big school. But I think there's got to be a way to build programmatic, things in. There's not, so special ed community here, although we talk a lot about it during budget season, becomes a very big issue. It's not a very large population. There's not many people who are touched with that issue. But I think the needs of all of our community members can't get lost because there's just not that many of them. And having kids spread across schools in equitable programming is not necessarily, I think we need to have a way that people understand that and get that as part of the decision process. Because I think there's advantages to actually bringing kids together with special needs. There's some pretty strong advantages to that are beyond, it costs less money to educate them. We only need to buy one specialized equipment, 2 specialized pieces of equipment. although that's where the conversation usually ends up, but for the children themselves, having a community of kids who are like them is really important. But those are the intangible soft things that I don't think everybody cares about or knows about, and maybe we need to figure out a way to build that into the process as well. Because it's something that I know both of us care very much.
Go ahead, Nick.
So just general observation, like. What I just saw happen here is exactly what everyone in that community room did. You want to jump immediately to solutions. And I think we're so eager to get a solution in place that we forget sometimes to listen and build that process together. And I'm hearing solutions being thrown out and ideas that weren't explored or might not have been explored. I think it would be best if we took the time that's remaining here tonight to discuss the report and the work of that committee. And then there should be some discussion at a council and school board level of how do we go about identifying needs for this next phase? How do we, what does the next phase possibly look like? And how do we go about that? So I guess my cautionary tale is here, while we throw out ideas of how we could solve this problem, because we're so eager to get involved in it, right now, I feel like it should have been really like, this is the report we have. What kind of questions do we have for them? Why did they end up with 4 solutions? Why, does that help us? Does it not help us? Are there people in this audience that want to, ask questions about the report that they've just received? And not everyone in this audience was a member of that committee.
Right.
So as eager as we are to offer solutions to everything, I think at this point, we're still should be listening and trying to plan for the next phase, but acknowledging the work that this community's done. And I just wanted to say before I have to leave this evening, I really appreciate the 50 to 70 people, as Peter pointed out, that gave hour after hour after hour on Monday. Incredible monumental effort. So appreciated to everyone.
And keep in mind, those are great points, Nick, and the communication committee is committed to kind of reaching out over the summer to see if there's any stone that's been left unturned. Is there any other good suggestions, anything else? They could be a great instrument to try to get a better pulse on some of the questions you're asking about the community. They're geared up to go. And Elizabeth and Dawn, I don't know if you guys want to speak to that, but that's.
Podium.
You're gonna have to come to the podium.
Thank you.
So my name is Don St. Germain. I'm on the Communications Committee, and that's the committee I wanted to be in because it struck me in thinking back over the process last year that one of the things that will depend whether something gets approved, no matter what it is whether we can build back trust of our citizenry in this group here. And building back trust is going to be to allow us to engage with these folks on an ongoing basis. So look at the exercise that you just had here. We have 4 solutions, and we did start to criticize them for technical aspects, and that's fine. But the important thing is there are 4 solutions that we can query our citizenry about to say, what do you think about this option? And just the fact of going and asking that question is the important thing. It really doesn't matter what they say. They've had the opportunity to be engaged. And so we won't see comments like, well, nobody asked me about that. And, I don't trust the committee because they had preconceived notions and things like that. So whether something is going to pass or not, we've got to put a great plan forward that's cost effective. But if there's not trust in the community, it's just all going to be for naught. So the Communications Committee is dedicated to trying to get that additional information that you're talking about and to ask people to be involved and engaged. And Elizabeth, who heads up the social media, has done a wonderful aspect of that. So I think that is one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is I think the survey has been over-interpreted about the neighborhood schools. If you look at the number, 53% favored strongly or a lot, and that leaves 46% who are on the nay side. It's not a big gap, and you've got a margin of error of 3.5%. What we do find is the people who favor the community schools are very vocal. They're passionate about that. And, but I think if you look if you look from a technical point at the difference in those numbers from the survey, it's not that great. But we will have to bring the neighborhood group together as we talk about this. So I think that's an important thing to say. And the last thing, since I have the floor here, and you haven't cut it off yet, is that this issue of the survey basically only representing people who voted bothers me a lot. Okay, you have, and it's when I saw that pie graph with 95%, did you vote in the election? And 95% of the survey respondents said yes. That floored me. It's very rare that you would see a survey that has that type of correlation between two variables. And we have no reason to believe that the people who didn't vote share the same values, have the same demographics, think the same way as the ones who didn't vote. And we have every reason to believe that there are differences there. So when you start extrapolating data about cost and what the community will support, I think you get to be on shaky ground, because the people who didn't vote, think about who they might be.
Don, I think.
I should shut up.
Well, no, I mean, that's a suggestion that we really need in the next phase, get some professional interpretation.
Exactly. We need a second opinion on that survey.
There you go,
particularly to
second
ask
opinion.
this question.
Yeah.
Well, and
But the point was that, as I understand it, the communication committee, if you guys have any things you want to test with the public in the next, the time between now and phase 2, you guys are the conduit to try to get that input from the public about what's missing, what could be different, would be very, very helpful to your deliberations, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're going to vote tonight. It's my understanding y'all will vote at your next meeting to accept the recommendation for the 4 solutions. And then the one thing I want to say really quickly is on page 19 is the timeline that the committee is suggesting for the next phase. And I feel immense pressure to have, a solution. I think it's no secret that I wanted to go back out in November, and obviously that's not going to happen. So I feel really passionate that we have to get, the 2 bodies have to get this document rolled out, what we want phase 2 to look like to meet these deadlines. Because we are gonna be hard pressed to make June if we don't stick to the deadline that they laid out. So I'm very confident with that. I think that the committee has demonstrated by accepting this that they're very confident in this timeline, that it's doable, and this would get us to a June referendum. So that's really important to me. Yeah.
So I think the feedback that Nick gave and that Mr. Jermaine gave about letting the process, like, we need to design a process that brings the community along. I get a little worried when we start talking about dates, because I feel like that forces us to maybe make choices that may not get us the outcome we want because we rush the process. And I think because of the fact that we are slightly divided, rather than focusing on a date right now, or when we go to the next step, I would really like to think about more your comment of like, what is our process to get to consensus? And what do we need to do? Unfortunately, that might take a lot of time. So I just want to caution us not to go too quickly, to make sure that we have a process that gets us the feedback from the community that hopefully gets us to a consensus point. And what that is, I don't know if it's a vote where we do something like I suggested, or maybe we get to a point where we have something that clearly is the top solution, but the feedback from the last cycle and even where we are now, we can't downplay the engagement that we need with the public. And so how do we design a process that we can confidently say, we've reached out as much as we could, we gave everybody opportunity. And once we have confidence that we've done that work, then we should start talking, in my opinion, about timing on a ballot. Again, I know we want to do it as quickly as possible, so I'm not saying we go super slow, but I worry about saying June at this point, because I don't know if between now and June, we're going to be successful at bringing the community fully along. Or I'm not there yet.
agree with both of you, which makes me unusually agree.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say, I agree with both of you. We have to take time to build the process right, because we need it to work. We also have a rush.
Yeah.
And I think that when the community understands and watches the budget numbers starting in 2027 tick up, because we're dealing with short-term solutions for
Right.
the enrollment that is pouring in on this kindergarten class and every
Absolutely.
kindergarten class that's coming, maybe the sense of urgency for the rest of the folks will match Shannon's, because we have seen those enrollment numbers.
Right.
We know what this means. We are gonna spend a lot of money because we didn't deal with this problem in a timely fashion. And that's gonna come out of people's pockets as well. And nobody wants to hear that right now. We're gonna wait for the budget crisis of 2026. But that conversation is inevitable.
Right.
It is absolutely inevitable. And no matter what solution we pass, it's not gonna be in time to address our needs. And I told you, I started with those to be agreeable. I agree with both of your points. But we're in a world of trouble.
Right.
So we need all.
We're in a world of trouble.
That's a great point, Ted.
Yeah, with doom and gloom, you knew it was bad when I started being agreeable.
Yes, I was like, oh.
So
it's really-
do you agree with?
Yeah, I think everybody, we're all in the collaborative.
So I know we have two questions out here. Really quick, but we have to wrap up because we have a 7 o'clock. I'll let you two go. Any other questions? Again, please send them to us. We'll bury them out. I can get answers for you. But I also want to just reiterate the thank you. I know we asked a lot of you, we asked when this referendum didn't pass, we asked you to come and we asked you to sit at the table and you did. And not only did you come, we asked you to put aside your thoughts and how you voted and we asked you to look at something with fresh eyes. And that's really hard. That's a really big ask. And then you came and you did what we asked. And then on your own, you realized we need to meet every single week for more than 3 months. It wasn't like 1 or 2, it was more than 3 months. So this was a huge time commitment for 50 to 70 people over a long course of time. And that can never be underestimated. And I cannot thank you enough. So thank you, those of you. Come on up, Jack. Just have to be quick, because if you can't hear, we have a group of teenagers in the hallway.
Jack Ray, King Mulberry Lane. Just a quick comment. I agree with you. We're in deep trouble and everything else. But the other comments, if you remember in the survey, there were an awful lot of people who were not going to accept our recommendations.
Yeah.
Unless they understand what those recommendations really are, we're in a no mode. So I think it's more important that we get them educated on whether it's 4 solutions or if you narrow it down to 2, and I hope you do narrow it down to 2. That's why you have to do that. Otherwise, it's gonna fail and we'll be back here in 2 years
Right.
doing the same thing and in deeper trouble. Remember that old adage, measure twice, cut once.
Thank you, Jeff. Hey, Carol.
Hi, Carol Gotra. Just to reinforce those who have already spoke this evening, the advisory committee is just that. We came up with 4 concepts and they are just that. They're concepts that need a lot of work. However, they are 4 concepts that responded to the survey. They responded to the needs, basic needs of our school people. And they responded to the immediate need for going forward. So what I would ask of all of us here is that when these 4 concepts move forward, it's quite easy to pick any one of them, say, and I'm going to use your example, and I'm not, no disrespect. It's very easy to come on any one of our proposals or concepts to come up with a reason why it might not work. Okay. Special needs, might be 2 people in a class. Let's say all other parameters are met for that situation. Then it becomes our job to resolve that special needs problem. Not change the whole school proposal or concept, but that special needs problem could be taken care of by possibly, instead of 2 people in 3 schools each, they're all in one of the schools. So all I'm suggesting is, let's keep an open mind. Let's listen to the input. And I think it would behoove us to take the concepts down to 2. And there are enough people in this room, I think, that could do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Can I have 2 seconds?
Yes, you can have 2 seconds.
Sorry, I know you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a website. I want to ask you all to share that website as widely as possible. We're looking to get information and feedback back from the residents of Scarborough. We're going to have tables at every event this summer, looking for feedback, handing out flyers, giving people some information about what the current ideas are, and really just seeking some feedback.
Yeah.
What do you think? You know, what are the deficiencies that you see? Please share them with us. And we will share that with you, but the more broadly we can, you know, share this information out, the better for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, oh yes, agenda item 5.0 is adjournment without any objections. I will adjourn at 7:06 PM. Thank you.